Today's episode of Variant is brought to you by Domain.com. Today on Variant, I finally talk about another symbiote, the long-requested antivenom. Welcome to Variant, where we love comics more than I'm excited to kick off Villains Month. I'm your host, Aris Quinones. For those of you who don't know, in honor of Halloween, Variant is dedicating the entire month of October to the bad guys. And to kick Villains Month off, I'm going to be talking about a symbiote you guys have been requesting for a while, antivenom. I've already done a history of Venom, Carnage, and Toxin, so of course it was only a matter of time before I talked about antivenom. Now I know antivenom isn't a villain per se, he's actually an anti-hero, but he's an extension of Venom, so I figured he was a good fit for Villains Month nonetheless. Plus he looks scary, and a lot of you guys have been wanting this episode, so let's talk about him. Diving right into it, not wasting any time, we first see antivenom in the 2011 storyline New Ways to Die in issue 569 of The Amazing Spider-Man. While once again praying at a church, Brock was discovered by a philanthropist named Martin Lee, who is secretly Mr. Negative. After attorney Matt Murdock proves in a court of law that Brock was not responsible for his actions while bonded to the Venom symbiote and has Eddie's charges dropped, Lee gets Brock a job in a soup kitchen. Eddie began life as a cook and continued rounds of chemotherapy in order to try to combat his cancer. When Eddie believed his terminal cancer was about to kill him, a touch from Mr. Negative charged the remnants of the Venom symbiote within his body and activated them, causing them to bond to his white blood cells. This created a brand new non-sentient symbiote that lived within Eddie's bloodstream, secretly healing his body of cancer. One day, Matt Gargan, who was the current Venom, was hunting for Spider-Man, and since they form a host, and presuming it to be Spider-Man, followed the Inkling. Gargan then encounters Brock instead of Spider-Man, and the Venom symbiote then attempts to leave Matt Gargan and rebond with Brock. However, upon making contact with Brock's skin, the new symbiote began to react. The white substance seeps out of his pores, and the Venom symbiote is immediately repelled. Once the symbiote completely covers his body and transforms his appearance, Brock declares himself antivenom. After becoming antivenom, Brock and Gargan fight with Spider-Man trying to break them up, but Spider-Man is punched out of the way by both symbiotes. Eddie tells Gargan that he only wants to save him from the symbiote and the poisonous deadly road it will lead him on. Antivenom defeats Gargan and nearly kills the Venom symbiote. Brock then detects remnants of the symbiote inside Spider-Man from when he wore the symbiote. He attempts to cure Spidey, draining radiation from his body and nearly depowering him. He doesn't, of course, because the Thunderbolts arrive to break it up, but from then on, Spider-Man's powers are greatly weakened in the presence of antivenom. The Thunderbolts try to kill the new symbiote, but Eddie proves immune to Sonic Bird's sonic projection and Radioactive Man's heat/radiation, unlike previous symbiotes, including Venom. Eddie then tries to cleanse Radioactive Man, but Sonic Bird saves him. Norman then tells them to retreat, and they take Gargan back to the base to heal him and Venom. Norman then uses the remnants of antivenom in Gargan to create a super Venom capable of destroying the new symbiote. He then outfits Gargan in a new Scorpion-powered suit that contains a cybernetic tail and a stinger filled with super Venom. The powered suit also allows the Venom symbiote to regenerate while providing new protection against antivenom's touch. Meanwhile, Brock saves Spider-Man from Bullseye and Norman Osborn, and the two team up. Long story short, after webbing Songbird and Radioactive Man to a wall, antivenom faces Gargan, who now embodies both his power sets as Scorpion and Venom. After a grueling battle, Gargan as Scorpion hits antivenom with his stinger and injects the super Venom, which seemingly destroys Brock's suit. Gargan then tries to kill Brock, but is met with resistance by the Venom symbiote. Gargan's symbiote gains strength and breaks through his battlesuit, refusing to let Gargan kill Brock. Gargan explains that the suit still loves Brock too much to do so, so Gargan gives up. But he promises Brock that he will get past this problem and someday finish him off, to which Brock replies, "Not if I kill you first." Unknown to Gargan, Brock's antivenom suit reforms. He admits that Spider-Man helped show him a side of humanity he had long forgotten, also saying there was more he could learn from him. Now a fugitive for helping Spider-Man and fighting the Thunderbolts, Brock is back on the streets planning to continue his religious quest as antivenom. Brock later faces the villain Mr. Negative and discovers that he and Lee are the same person. Learning that the man he idolized is a supervillain causes a breakdown for Brock, making him question his faith, referring to himself as a monster. After this revelation, he becomes increasingly unstable mentally, murdering small-time criminals as he did during his Lethal Protector days. He briefly and reluctantly teams up with the Punisher to stop a drug cartel that kidnapped a friend of Brock's. This leads us into the return of the antivenom story. During the road to Spider Island, antivenom makes a return. In this arc, he begins a crusade against Mr. Negative's crime wave and eventually finds Martin Lee himself. As antivenom tears apart his limo, Spider-Man intervenes and stops Brock from killing what he believes is an innocent man. Spider-Man is easily defeated by Brock's new suit and is captured. Later, Eddie tries to convince Spider-Man that Martin Lee and Mr. Negative are one in the same. Due to his disbelief, Spider-Man is forced to tag along with Brock as he continues his search for Mr. Negative. Eventually, antivenom is ambushed and stabbed by what seems to be a Negative sword that causes him to lose the upper hand. The character Wraith then teams up with the two and they reveal Negative's true identity to the press and he is arrested. The story ends with antivenom finally becoming a hero. During Spider Island, antivenom appears as a reoccurring recurring character in the events of Spider Island, in which he uses his healing powers to turn the affected citizens of New York from spider-powered beings back to everyday citizens. When the heroes discover that Eddie Brock holds the only cure for the infestation, Flash Thompson engages in a fight with Antivenom in order to secure and deliver him to Reed Richards. To which I say, don't start none, won't be none. Which I'm not really sure if that really makes sense for the situation, but I really wanted to say it. Richards then uses the suit in order to cure New York, but at the cost of Eddie losing his beloved symbiote. Eddie's sacrifice did not go unnoticed. Reed Richards held a press conference praising Eddie Brock as a true hero of Spider Island. In the aftermath, Eddie was left with nothing to show for his sacrifice. He took up living in a shack, gathering weapons that he had confiscated in his years as Venom. His new goal becomes eradicating the symbiote species before they eventually grow in numbers and take over the Earth. He soon kills Hybrid and Scream and plans to go after Venom next. But fear not, my comic comrades, Eddie Brock's career with the symbiote is not over here, because he later becomes the new Toxin and declares he wants to kill Venom above all else. But if you want to know more about Toxin, I already did a history of episode on him, so you can watch that if you'd like. But now that you know about Antivenom's origin, let's talk about some powers and abilities. Antivenom has superhuman strength, durability, stamina, accelerated healing, offspring detection, meaning he is capable of physically detecting its offspring. He can also wall crawl, has webbing generation, a spider sense, immunity to Spider-Man's spider sense, and camouflage capabilities. One of his coolest powers by far is internal bodily cleansing. After sensing an impurity, Antivenom can forcefully cure the substance from the person's body using antibodies produced by the symbiote. He uses this ability to almost completely destroy his old symbiote, and he cured a young girl from her heroin addiction. Hence his name Antivenom, because he's the cure for things impure. But now that I've told you about his powers, it's time for some reading recommendations. You have the New Ways to Die storyline, the New Ways to Live storyline, the Return of Antivenom, and the Spider Island storyline. When you buy a domain name from domain.com, you get the power to influence and control